So how did you go about finding clients to do these valuations for?
There wasn't a whole lot of internet going on, so it really was word of mouth and going in making presentations. It was generally presentations on helping the users of our reports and my reports understand what they were getting. Um, so that still is a really effective way, I think, to get your um, get your name sort of across and your brand across people's minds, just to go in and talk to them about the nuances of it and how to read a report and what this means and how to get information and interpret it. So I did a lot. I did a lot of that. It was always funny because I'd go into the meetings, and I was, as I said, I was 21 years old, so I would always go in, and the assumption was that I was the salesperson. So I would lead the meeting, and then someone would call the office and say, "Oh yeah, I want to make sure we order these assignments from your company, but make sure that Keith gets credit because he came out and did a pretty good job of selling the business." So I guess
Okay.
that was my other hat, right? So
Right. And so did you do the marketing side as well, or did you have somebody market for you?
yeah, we had some independent folks that came in and did some of the marketing, but again, it wasn't a lot of there was no CRM
Right.
program. It was all basically literally mailers and all the things we do now kind of laugh at compared to what we did back in the day. Certainly there are conferences, and those are still things that we have today, that where we go and you either have a booth or sit on panels, and it's sort of a similar version of what I just described, and going in, doing some education, some thought leadership type things.
Perfect. And so we talked about, the resources you had at your disposal and what you did in the beginning stages. Who helped you in this process? And like what support do they specifically bring to you?
Well, yeah, and I didn't have any specific mentors, but there were
Uh-huh.
professionals in the space that from a technical standpoint was really important to make sure I understood. So there were people that I knew back when I was at the bank,
Right.
that I could call upon, and that were generous with their time. There were other folks that were in the space competitively that were generous with their time. So, if I encountered with an assignment, I would reach out to them when I went to talk to them about how they sold their business, and particularly when I went through that credentialing program. I mean, it was pretty rigorous, and generally speaking, in the appraisal profession, back then you worked collaboratively, and so you were in an office with a number of other appraisers, and there were the younger ones and the more experienced ones. But as it is now, everybody works solo, and so
Okay.
I had the benefit then of having mentors around that I could talk to and pick their brains
Right.
on all the pieces of the business. And then just folks in my family friends that ran businesses, and I in the community that we lived in, there were a lot of realtists, African American realtors that were very generous about what they did, and so it sort of helped guide me on the path of what part of the business I wanted to be in.
Seeds of Hope. I know I've watched something about that. Can you explain that a little bit and how that works?
Yeah, so Seeds of Hope is a nonprofit, or 501c3 that consists of employees from both PCV and from DRM.
Okay.
We encourage them to find causes that are important in their community, generally around housing. And we get together, the employees will generally donate funds to the Seeds of Hope. We will match the funds, and then we also sometimes will get funds from our vendors that all go into the organization. So for example, I think actually this weekend in Texas, we are having a golf tournament in support of a wounded veterans organization.
Okay.
So and then in California, so most of the organizations are local to where the offices are. So in the case of PCV, we support organizations in LA County and in Orange County. But they are really all ones that come to the table from our employees. And so that's what's really exciting to me, is that we have folks that are really come to work with an idea of wanting to be supportive and support organizations anywhere from prom gowns for young women in LA, to homeless shelters. I mean, it's been quite a path. Court appointed advocacy, it's for CASA. So a lot of different organizations that we've supported through Seeds of Hope.
What made you want to get involved with Seeds of Hope and get that going? Was it just,
It just
you
was
giving
important.
spirit?
It's just important. Yeah, it was important to me and my wife. I mean, we personally believe in giving back, and so when we started it, we started with the idea of, hey, we will match what you guys do, what you think are important in our community, in the communities that you live in, and it just sort of blossomed, and it was everything from okay, well, we'll give you a free dress day if you make a $5 donation, and then it went to a whole other level in terms of the ideas that they were bringing to the tables, and highlighting what was really happening in the community. So it's very, very different what happens in Texas versus what happens here, but both come from the same place.
Speaking of relationships, how was your experience meeting President Obama? I know I read about that. I know it must have been
fantastic.
such a surreal moment.
It was fantastic. Yeah. I actually was there the week that they opened the Martin Luther King Memorial. And this was some years ago, but I think they had an earthquake in DC. I don't know if you remember that, and they kept closing down all the monuments. And so I had an opportunity during the day to go tour the King exhibit, which was phenomenal. And I'm trying to remember the quote, but on the side of it, because it stuck with me, and I'm putting myself on the spot. But I think it said something to the effect of out of I can't remember, and I don't want to misquote it. So I will, but it had a great quote that's based on Stone Mountain. So when you look it up,
okay,
you remember it. But I did that during the day, and then that evening I was in a house in Georgetown, and it was surreal because you're in a house, and all of a sudden you hear the helicopters going overhead, and you hear the motorcycles coming up, the motorcade come up the street, and there was a half a dozen of us sitting in a room, and the doors were kind of closed, and you see this person kind of walks through the door, and you hear him say, "Hello, everybody." And then we had the chance to talk. It was fantastic. Fantastic.
Man, that's amazing. Did that motivate you in any way to want to just do better and keep going? Or I know you're already in the mid stages of your business already, but how did that motivate you to?
Well, more than anything, it was pride that I felt, in what he was doing and what he represents in the history of our country, and just the honor. I mean, certainly, my grandmother has since passed, but it was certainly for our family. My dad retired as a Teamster, drove a truck, and my grandmother, worked in a home and took care of a family, and so their son and grandson to have an audience with the President of the United States, the first Black President of the United States, was a family, was a very big moment. So,
ask you to choose one word that you believe characterizes yourself personally or professionally.
Well, personally, is faithful.
Okay.
Yeah, personally, is faithful. Our business, it's service.
Service.
We're all about being of service to our customers and to their customers, and making sure that when we deliver service, whether it's direct partners that we work with, that we're doing the right thing in communities, because we in a lot of ways are very much connected to the communities that we're doing work. That's more, but
I can narrow it down
it's faithfulness and it's service.